Hi, I'm Chris Converse, and this is a course on creating a responsive web design. I want to start by showing the final project of what we're going to be creating. We're going to be building this design that we see here in the background, and I want to point out some of the features of this responsive design. First, if I take the browser and open it up, we're going to lock the design down to 980 pixels so that the design will center in the available space on large screens. And when we bring the browser size down under 980, the design's going to start to become fluid. So we can see the columns wrapping in the center, we can see the typography moving around, and when we get under certain breakpoints, like right here, we're going to start shifting the design completely using CSS3 media queries. So you'll notice here that we have a much smaller heading at the top, a smaller logo. We've even rearranged the promos to have the type show up underneath of the graphics instead of on the right-hand side. So I'll extend this open again to look at the large screen. Come down to medium. Notice we have a navigation bar here showing up under the header as well. On medium screens, we actually space the navigation out a little bit, assuming that we might be on a tablet device. We want to give users enough room to tap these with their fingers. And if we bring the design down even further, under 500 pixels, we switch into a mobile screen view. We have a much smaller heading graphic at the top, a smaller logo. We have our promos showing up as vertically stacked items instead of in columns. And also notice that we have the navigation now shifted down to be underneath all of the content. On mobile devices, we want to have the content show first so that users can see the content, swipe down to the bottom with their fingers, and then tap on individual links to go further into your site. Now all of this is being achieved through CSS. So if I open this up, we can see the navigation will jump down from being from the bottom to under the header, and then up to our large screen. Now during the course, we're going to be examining a sketch, which is going to give us our content strategy for how we're going to change our design from large, medium, and small screens, and give us an idea on where we're going to position individual elements. And once we know all of the individual elements we have in place, we're then going to move over to Photoshop, where we can take a Photoshop file, slice up individual graphics, and then build an HTML file with individual containers, and then have those individual graphics assigned into the individual HTML containers using CSS. This is going to give us two distinct advantages in this particular approach. One, we're going to have the ability to have a CSS-based layout that can have its design modified through media queries. And secondly, we can offer something called responsive delivery, meaning we can actually send less data to people on small and medium screens than on large screens. And to illustrate that point, I want to come back to Safari. So inside of Safari here, I'm in the large screen view. I'm going to right-click, bring up an inspection tool, come under Network Requests, and then hit Reload. What I want to look at in here is all of the data that's being downloaded for this large screen. So here I can see we have the large banner graphic, and if I look at the size column, I can see the size of every graphic that's being requested at this particular size. If we were to add all these up, we'd come up with about 180 kilobytes of data. So let's come back to Safari. I'm going to move this down to the medium screen view, come back to our diagnostic tool, hit Reload. I can see now that we're bringing in the medium-sized banner graphic. And again, if we look at the size column here and added these up, we'd come up with about 73 kilobytes of data. Come back to Safari. Let's bring this down to the smallest screen. Let's reload this. Now we can see a few extra graphics. We have a mobile link arrow to give us those mobile link styles at the bottom. We're using our small banner. And again, if we were to add up all of the sizes in that particular column, we would come up with about 32 kilobytes. So we're looking at approximately 83% less data when somebody looks at the exact same user experience on a small screen device versus a large screen device. So I hope this course sounds interesting to you, and if so, let's get started. When you download the exercise files, there's going to be 5 folders inside of there. If you're a premium subscriber to the lynda.com online training library, you'll have access to all 5 folders. If not, you'll have access to folders 1, 2, and 4. These are the minimum number of files that you'll need to complete the course. Inside of folder 1 is files to add. This is going to give us a series of blank CSS files and a mostly empty HTML file. I provided these just to make sure we're all working from valid HTML and CSS files. Inside of folder 2 is a skip Photoshop folder. Inside of the images to add, we have a copy of all of the final files we're going to be making for graphics inside of Photoshop. So if you want to skip the Photoshop aspect and just continue with the HTML and CSS, you can add the graphics from this folder here. Inside of folder 3 are the art templates. These are the source Photoshop files we're going to be using to customize and complete the individual slices. Inside of folder 4 are 2 files we're going to be using as snippets so we can cut and paste some pieces of code into our project. And then finally, inside of folder 5 is a copy of the final project we looked at in the introduction video. So you can use this file to track how you're doing throughout the course. Now that we're familiar with the exercise files, next we'll talk about what software you're going to need to complete the course. Now throughout this course, we're going to be coding our HTML and CSS, so I recommend using a text editor. There's a whole series of available text editors for both Macintosh and Windows. Some are paid, some are free. So here's a list of some of the most popular ones on both platforms. You can also use more visually oriented web tools like Adobe Dreamweaver, for example. You just need to have access to the source code. So no matter what tool you're using, there has to be some area where you can get to the source code of the HTML. We're also going to be using Adobe Photoshop to create some of our graphics, and you'll need to have at least CS2 or later since we need to have access to the slicing tool in order to create some of our optimized graphics. Now, as a special note to Dreamweaver users, we're going to be talking about how you can set up Dreamweaver in the next chapter so that you can actually follow along in Dreamweaver. So once you have a text editor set up that you can use for this course, we'll continue by creating our project files. To begin our project, let's create a folder on the desktop. We'll name this My Website. I'm going to open this up and put it over here on the side. Now with our folder created, let's come back to the exercise files. Let's go into folder 1. Let's grab the CSS folder and the HTML file. Let's drag a copy of these into that folder we just created. Now, as I mentioned earlier, most of the content in these files is empty. I just wanted to make sure that we all had a properly formatted HTML and CSS file to work from. Inside of our My Website folder, let's create another folder called Images. I'm going to open this up. Let's come back to our exercise files. Let's close up folder 1 and let's go into folder 2, skip Photoshop. Let's open up Images to add, and let's come in here and select all of these individual graphics. And let's drag a copy of these into the Images directory. So these will give us a series of images that we can start from, and later on, if you want to skip the Photoshop chapter, you can just skip that and go right back to the HTML and CSS. But if you want to follow along in the Photoshop chapter, we'll actually customize some of these graphics based on the images you want to change inside of Photoshop. So now once all of these files are in place, close up my exercise files. Now on the desktop, we have our My Website folder. We have a CSS folder and an index.html file. Now in the next chapter, we're going to talk specifically about how to set up Dreamweaver to follow along in this course. So if you're not going to be using Dreamweaver as your authoring tool, you can skip ahead to chapter 2 and continue on. For those of you who are going to follow along using Adobe Dreamweaver, I want to point out a few things. First of all, Dreamweaver CS5 and later have full support for HTML5 and CSS3, but it has this full support in the code area only. So the preview area inside of Dreamweaver doesn't have full support for rendering HTML5 and CSS3 while you're actually working on your course. So in this screenshot here, this is what Dreamweaver CS5 and 5.5 will look like when you finish your project. You'll notice that you don't see the heading area at all. The logo is off to the right-hand side. The navigation appears down below the footer, and the navigation actually extends past the outer page container. Now if we look at a copy of our final project inside of Dreamweaver CS6, we'll see that this actually looks a little bit closer. We do see the heading area, we see the navigation in the right position, but the logo is off to the right, and the width of the navigation element still extends past the overall page container. Now these rendering issues only affect Dreamweaver inside of the design preview. So if we come back to our final project, I'm going to open up the index.html file up in Dreamweaver CS5.5, and this is what we're actually seeing here in the design preview. But if I come up here and click on the live view, what Dreamweaver will do is use its built-in WebKit rendering engine and render this page exactly as we would see it in our web browsers. So once I turn on live view, I can see the design comes into place. I can scroll down and see all of the design elements are properly being rendered. I can change my window size and see the medium size, and then close this all the way down and see the mobile size. So while we're in live view, Dreamweaver will show us exactly what this design will look like inside of our preview mode. But when I come out of live view, we'll go back to Dreamweaver's default rendering for the preview area. So as you're working along in Dreamweaver, don't take what you see in the design preview area as the final rendering of your page. Make sure you switch into live view or preview in a browser to see how your project is progressing. And next we'll talk about how to access code inside of Dreamweaver for both HTML and CSS files. Now inside of Dreamweaver, when you have your HTML file open, you'll see in the top left-hand corner you have 3 buttons here. We have design, which gives us our design view here. A split screen view, where selecting this will actually take the HTML file and split it. Half the screen will be the HTML code. The other half will actually be the design preview. And then we have a code view here, which will give us full code access to the file we're working on. This is going to be the mode that you're going to want to work in following this course. There's another nice feature inside of Dreamweaver, and that is at the very top of the document, you can see all of the related files up here. So as we hook in different CSS files, clicking on these items here will then change Dreamweaver to show you the source code for the linked CSS file. Now this can be really handy because you can jump through different CSS files rather quickly. You can also go to the File menu and choose Open and select the CSS files in addition. If you do that, you'll see the individual files opened up here next to the index.html file. So inside of Dreamweaver, you can open the individual files, or you can get access to them by clicking on the Related Files tabs. And lastly, when you're coding inside of this window down here, for example, if I come in here and try to access a CSS3 property, something like border radius, for example, you can see that Dreamweaver's code completion will come up. And if I scroll through here, I can actually see properties like border radius. So this is a CSS3 property, and we'll get the same effect in the HTML window for HTML5. So as I mentioned before, we do have support for HTML5 and CSS3 inside of Dreamweaver, but all of the access to those elements and the code completion is built only into the code area. So now that you know how to follow along with this course while working inside of Dreamweaver, next we'll start planning out our project. Now before we start building our HTML and CSS, we need to plan our layout. So what I have inside of folder 3 is a file called adesign.psd. This is a source Photoshop file that will help you sort of decide the colors and photography if you want to modify or change the design. So over in the layers panel here, we have all of the content here broken into folders. So promo 3, for example, is this promo area down here on the right-hand side. And we also have done a few things in here which will help you sort of style some of the content. We have a link color block here, and this is clip grouped into the text here. So if I come up to the layer menu, come down and say release clipping mask, you can see that this is just a box. Let's re-enable that. Let's go to layer, create clipping mask. And we took this box and actually wrapped it inside of a smart object. So if I double click this link color, what we've done is take this smart object, duplicated it all around the canvas, and used it as our linking color. So if I came in here, for example, and changed the orange to green and hit save in the smart object, notice in the background all of the individual links that we've clip grouped into type now change to green. This gives us a really quick way to sort of mock up what our linking colors are going to look like for our client. Now it is worth noting that if you're using Photoshop CS6, they do have paragraph and character styles in CS6. So you can create this same linking effect using character styles instead of this clipped in smart object. Inside of the heading area, you'll see that we've used clipping groups for the main image as well. So I can select this graphic here and move this around and change the crop of the photograph at the top. So again, this file is here to help you customize the photography and link colors and the promo graphics for your project. Now I am going to be touching on more web tools built into Photoshop when we get to the graphics section. But if you want to learn more about using Photoshop for web design, I suggest taking Justin Seeley's course in the lynda.com online training library entitled Photoshop for Web Design. And now since this design comp gives us a pretty good idea on the colors and the basic structure, I want to bring up a sketch so we can take a look at how we're going to migrate this design across different screen sizes. We're going to start by creating a main page container. Inside of the page container, we're going to have an area for the header. This is going to have a background graphic with our photograph at the top. We're going to have a navigation area, an article area, a promo container, and inside of the promo container, we're going to have 3 individual promo containers for each individual promo, and then our footer. And as you can see, as the highlights are moving around on the sketch, you can see where these individual containers are going to be placed based on the user screen size. And now that we know all of the main HTML containers that we need, next we can start working on our HTML file. Now to create our HTML containers, we're going to open up the index.html file in the My Website folder up in your chosen text editor. Now inside here we have just a standard HTML document. We have the declaration here at the top. We have our HTML tag, which contains everything inside of the document. Then we have the heading area and then the body area. So for right now, we're going to focus on inside of the body area. select this comment here that says content goes here, delete that, and now let's create the containers for our layout. We're going to start by creating a div tag. We're going to set a class equal to page. Let's end that tag and then end the div. Let's split this open. This is going to be the main page container. Now inside here, we're going to create the individual containers to hold the content. We're going to start by creating a header element. This is an HTML5 element. Let's hit a few returns. Let's add an article element. That's another HTML5 element. Let's hit a few returns. Next, we're going to create a div that's going to be our promo container. So type div. Let's set a class of promo underscore container and the tag and the div. A few more returns. Another HTML5 element called nav. Let's end that tag. And then finally, one more element called footer. So right now the HTML5 elements here are header, article, nav, and footer. And then here we have a standard div with a class of promo container. Now that we have our outermost containers created, next we'll create the individual containers for each promo inside of the promo container div. Next, we'll set a container for each individual promo. So let's get our cursor inside of the div with a class of promo container. Let's split that open. Inside, let's add another div. Set class equal to promo and the tag and the div. Next, let's come in here and copy this. Set a few more returns and let's paste 2 more of these. Now with all of our content containers in place, next we'll start adding in some content. So now we're going to add some links and text into our content containers. So let's come down here to the header element. Let's split that open, and we're going to create our logo out of an anchor link. So let's start by typing an anchor tag. Let's hit a space. Let's set a class of logo, then hit a space. Let's add an href. We're going to set that equal to a £, which is a self link, and then end the tag, and then end the anchor tag. So again, this is just a standard anchor link, and we're going to turn this into a logo by giving it dimensions and giving it a background graphic of the actual logo. Next, we'll come down to the navigation element. Let's split that open, and in here we're going to add 4 links for our main navigation. So let's start with an anchor tag. We're going to set href equal to a £. Let's end the tag. We'll type in about us and the anchor tag. I'm going to select this entire link. I'm going to paste this a few more times. And the second one, let's change about us to services. The next link we'll call portfolio. And then lastly, we'll call this one contact us. And then let's come down to the footer. Let's split that open, and let's just add a copyright for our website. So ampersand, COPY, semicolon, hit a space, and then just type your organization name. Now that we have links in our heading and navigation area and a copyright statement, next we'll open up a snippet and put some placeholder text in some of the other containers. Now I've prepared a snippet of a bunch of placeholder text that we can place into some of these other containers. So from your text editor, choose File, Open. Locate your exercise files. Let's go into folder 4 called Snippets, and let's open placeholdertext.html. Now inside this file, I have groups of placeholder text. So up here on line 5, we have the article settings. So let's come in here and select from the beginning H1 tag all the way out to the ending paragraph tag. Let's copy this to the clipboard. Let's switch back to index.html, and inside of the article element, let's split that open. Let's paste our content in here. I'm also going to format this a little bit so we can see the structure. So inside of article, we have an H1 and a paragraph tag. Let's switch back to our placeholder text. Let's come down here under promo 1. Let's copy the content div and everything inside of there. Copy that to the clipboard. Switch back to index.html. I'm going to scroll up here and find the first promo div. Split that open. Let's paste our content inside of there. I'm going to format that a little bit. Let's come back to our placeholder text. Let's copy all of the content for promo 2. Copy that to the clipboard. Let's find the second promo container. Let's paste all of our content in here. I'll format that. Back to our placeholder text. Let's copy all of the content for promo 3. Copy to the clipboard. Back to index. Let's find the third promo element, split that open, and paste our content inside of there. So now we have placeholder text inside of the article element, and we have placeholder text inside of each one of the promo elements. At this point, save your file. Let's come back out to the operating system and let's open our index.html file up in a web browser. So in the web browser, we'll see all of the HTML content showing up here. So this is a very well-structured HTML document. We don't have any CSS in place, so we're not seeing any design aspect, but we have all of our document structure in place. Now in the next chapter, we're going to work inside of Photoshop, creating our web graphics, customizing some of our slices and saving those graphics out. If you want to skip the Photoshop session, you can go right from here over to chapter 4 and continue with the HTML and CSS portion of this course. Now the first set of graphics we're going to create are going to be the 3 different banner sizes. So let's come back to the exercise files. Let's open up folder 3 and let's open up banner artwork.psd. Now if you take a look in the layers panel on this file, you'll see that we have 3 different smart objects here. Each smart object is clip grouped into a black square. So to see what the clipping group does, I'll select the middle one here, come up to the layer menu, choose release clipping mask, and then you'll see the original photograph here, not clipped inside of the black box that you can see in the background. So this gives us a really nice way to non-destructively crop our images. So let's come back and re-enable that clipping mask. And if I move the photograph around while it's clipped, you'll see that the photograph will remain inside of that black box area. So the black boxes I created on those individual layers match the sizes of the graphics we want to have in our final project. Now if you want to modify the artwork inside of the banners, double click on one of these smart objects and Photoshop will bring up the original graphic inside of that smart object. So here we can see the original graphic here. I'm going to come in here and just make a change. I'll just invert the image. Once the image is inverted, I'll come up here and choose File, Save, and then notice that every instance of this smart object on the background canvas will update based on the changes I make here. So I'm going to undo that change, hit Save. So inside of here you can copy and paste your own artwork and then again customize the banners with whatever content you want. Once that's complete, what we're going to do next is create slices on here so that we can save out individual graphics from this one single Photoshop canvas. So let's come over to the cropping tool. Let's click and hold, and let's come down and select the slicing tool. So the slicing tool allows us to click and drag an area on this canvas that can be saved out as a separate graphic from the overall Photoshop file. So let's bring our cursor to the upper left-hand corner of the larger banner. Let's click and drag and draw out a slice. Now the tool will be a little sticky, so it should stick to the actual black box underneath. Once we've drawn the slice, let's double click and bring up the slice properties. So inside here we can give our slice a name and make sure of the dimensions as well. So for the name, let's call this banner large. Let's come down here and make sure that this is set to 980 pixels wide by 275 pixels tall. Then click OK. Back in our canvas, let's draw a slice for the medium size. Once the slice is drawn, double click. We'll call this banner medium and make sure this is set to 800 by 200 pixels. Let's choose OK. Let's come down and draw one final slice for the small banner. Double click. We'll call this banner small, and this should be set to 500 by 75. So this kind of stuck to 74, so I can just type in 75 and click OK here. Now that we've got our slices drawn, let's come up to the File menu. Let's choose Save for Web and Devices. If you're using Photoshop CS6, this menu will simply say Save for Web. This is going to bring up a large dialog box where we can pick individual slices and pick compression settings and file formats for each of our slices. So in this main area here, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so we can see all 3 slices. So I'm going to select the top slice here, and on the upper left-hand corner here, I can see I'm on my slice tool. With this slice selected, in the right hand side I can pick the file format. So I can choose GIF, JPEG, two different PNG files or a Windows bitmap, and I can choose the quality over here. So for this one we're going to come in here and make sure we have JPEG set. And for the quality, since this is the large size on computers, what we're going to do is set that to 80% quality. Now in the lower left hand corner, Photoshop will show me exactly how big this file is going to be when we save this out. So this particular JPEG is going to be 150.8 kilobytes. Let's come into the canvas area and select the medium banner. We're going to make sure this is set to JPEG as well. And in here, we're going to set the quality down to 50%. We're probably on a tablet device for this particular size, and tablet devices have a much higher pixel density on their screens, so we can get away with compressing this a little bit more. And this is going to be only 41 kilobytes if we look down in the file size. Next, we'll come into the main canvas, select the smallest banner, set that to a JPEG file. These are going to be used mostly on phones, which again have a higher pixel density and much smaller screens as well, so we can get away with even more file compression here. So let's set this down to 30%. That's going to give us a 7.3 kilobyte file size. And once we're done here, we're going to come down and click Save. This next dialog wants to know where to save the files and which particular slices. So let's start at the bottom under Slices. Let's come down here and choose All User Slices. This tells Photoshop only the slices that you've actually drawn are the ones we want to save. And up in the file structure, let's come in and pick My Website, and let's pick the Images directory, and then we'll hit Save. Now we already have the graphics in there because we added them at the beginning of the course, but if you've made changes or any customizations, we want to replace those individual graphics. So we'll come over here, click Replace, and have Photoshop overwrite the graphics we added with the new ones we just created. Now at this point, let's choose File Save. All of your slices are actually saved with this Photoshop file, so you can always go back, make additional changes, and just do a Save for Web and update your slices as many times as you want. And now close this file. Next, we'll create the remaining artwork for the rest of the elements in our design. Next, we're going to create the graphics for the promos, our logos, and the little arrows that we're using for our links. So inside of the Art Templates folder in the exercise files, let's open up contentartwork.psd. Now if you have your slice tool selected, you'll see the individual slices here. So this is a case where we have a Photoshop file with the slices already saved. So as you can see, those slices are actually saved with each Photoshop file. Now over on the right hand side in the Layers panel here, I have a layer at the bottom called FPO. I'll just turn this on real quick so we can see behind these individual graphics. These are going to be saved out as 24-bit PNGs, so they're transparent. So I have this gray layer here so we can actually see the artwork. So I'm going to zoom up in here. With our slice tool selected, we can see the individual slices. I can double click on one of these, for example, and see promo 1. This is set to 60 pixels by 60 pixels. Over in the layers panel, I have all of these areas grouped into different folders. So inside promo images, we have each one of these grouped into 3 squares at the bottom. We have our background pattern, which I can see over on the right hand side here. We have 2 styles of arrows. I'll move the canvas over here a little bit and zoom up. This one right here we're going to be using as a CSS sprite, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And this is our mobile arrow. So this is the arrow we're going to use on small screen devices. Let me zoom out a little bit. Back in the layers panel, inside of logo, I have 3 different sizes of the logo as well. So again, you can come in here and customize any of this artwork. So to save these out, let's make sure we turn off the FPO layer. I'm going to zoom out. Let's choose File, Save for Web and Devices. And all of the optimization settings are saved with these. So if I select the large logo here, come over here to the right, we can see that this is set to a 24-bit PNG, which is going to give us 16 bits of color plus 8 bits of transparency. So we'll get a nice gradient mask or semi-transparent pixels on the drop shadow. These graphics up here are all set to JPEGs. The background pattern is set to a JPEG. These small arrows here are both set to PNGs as well. So from here, let's come down and choose File, Save. Under Slices, let's make sure All User Slices is selected. Up in the operating system, let's choose My Website, the Images directory, and then hit Save. Here we can see a list of all of the graphics that are going to be modified from Photoshop based on these individual slices. So we'll come over here and click Replace, and then Photoshop will overwrite all of those graphics. Once that's complete, we can save and close this file. Now that we have all of the graphics created that we're going to be referencing with our CSS files, next we'll work on hooking the CSS files into the HTML file. Now we're going to add 2 of our 4 CSS files into our document using standard CSS links. So inside of the index.html file opened up in your text editor, up in the heading area, we're going to get our cursor after the title tag. Let's hit a return. Let's start a new tag. This is going to be a link tag. Let's hit a space. Let's set an attribute of rel for relationship. We're going to set that equal to style sheet, then a space. Next attribute's called type. Text/CSS is the value, then a space. Next we'll set href, and here we want to point to the screenstyle.css file. That's inside of the CSS folder. So we'll type CSS:\screen_styles.css. Then after that attribute, hit a space, / and then end the tag. Now that screenstyles.css contains CSS rules that we're going to use for all of the different layouts. Next line, let's add another link. Relationship is style sheet. Type is text CSS. href CSS /screen_layout_large.css / and then end that tag. So now that we have links to our 2 base CSS files, next we'll add links to the 2 remaining files, but we're going to put those inside of CSS media queries. Now we're going to link in 2 additional CSS files, but we're going to put these inside of CSS3 media queries. So after our screen_large_layout.css, let's hit a return. Let's add another link tag. We'll type relationship equals style sheet. Type equals text/CSS. The next attribute is going to be media equals 2 quotes. Inside of the quotes for media, we're going to type only screen and then we're going to put a beginning and ending parenthesis. Inside of the parentheses, we're going to type min width :50 px for 50 pixels. Outside of the parentheses, we're going to type and another set of parentheses, and inside of the second set of parentheses, we're going to type max dash width : 500 pixels. After the media attribute, let's hit a space. We'll type href, and in here we're going to type CSS / screen_layout_small.css. Outside of the attribute, / and then end the tag. So basically what's happening here is if the screen size is between 50 pixels all the way up to a maximum of 500 pixels, the browser is going to use the CSS rules located in the screen small layout.css. Now let's copy this entire link. Let's hit a return. Let's paste it on the next line. Let's come in here and let's select the 50 pixels here and change that to 501 so that it's 1 pixel larger than the largest screen for the small size. And then for maximum width, let's change 500 to 800. Now if the browser's width is between 501 and 800, we're going to change the screen layout small to screen layout medium. And now that we have our small and medium screens hooked in through media queries, next we'll look at enabling Internet Explorer 7 and 8 to understand HTML5. Now we're going to add support for IE 7 and 8 so that they can understand HTML5. So I have a snippet in the snippets folder to do this. So let's choose File, Open. From the exercise files, let's go into folder 4 snippets. Let's open up B, Google Shiv.html. Now inside of here we have a link to a Google HTML5 Shiv, and we have a conditional statement here for IE. Let's select and copy these 3 lines of code. Let's come back to index.html, and after the medium CSS media query, let's hit a return, and let's paste these in. So basically this entire item here is an HTML5 comment, but inside here with the brackets, this is a conditional structure that only Internet Explorer understands. So basically this says if the browser is less than IE 9, which means IE 7 and 8, we're going to link in this JavaScript here from Google. So this JavaScript basically loads into IE 7 and 8 and explains to IE 7 and 8 how to render HTML5 elements. Elements such as the header tag here and the article tag that we're using in our layout. And since this entire instruction is inside of an HTML comment, other browsers will just ignore this altogether. So now that we've added HTML5 support for IE 7 and 8, next we'll actually work on the viewport scaling to make sure that the viewport size doesn't scale on tablets and mobile devices. Now, one of the great things about mobile web browsers is they have the ability to take a full-size web page and scale them down so that they fit on a very small screen. This gives users the ability to pinch and zoom onto the content in order to read it. The idea behind responsive design is to take that same content and rearrange the layout so that they don't have to pinch and zoom, and the layout actually fits or conforms to the screen size. Now, in order to do this, we need to add a line of HTML code to tell the browsers what to do with the viewport on page load. So back in our HTML file, let's find the line for our meta tag. At the end of the line, let's hit a return and add in another meta tag. So after meta, let's hit space, type name equals 2 quotes. Inside of the quotes, type viewport. After that attribute, let's hit a space and add a second one called content. So inside here, what we're going to do is set width equal to device dash width, then a comma, space, maximum dash scale equals 1.0, comma, space, minimum dash scale equals 1.0, then a comma, space, then initial dash scale equals 1.0. Outside of the attribute, space, /, and end the meta tag. So this tag is going to target the viewport here, and then we're going to set the width of the viewport to whatever the device is and the initial scale, which is on page load. Now we have a minimum and maximum scale here. These are optional, but they'll make sure that on some devices, the scale won't change on orientation. So when somebody rotates between portrait and landscape, the scaling won't be modified. So now with our viewport set, next we can start working on some CSS rules for the content. Now the first CSS file we're going to work in is going to be screenstyles.css. So from your text editor, choose File, Open. From the My Website folder, let's go into the CSS folder and open up screenstyles.css. Now the first rule we're going to target in here is going to be the body tag. So we'll type body, beginning and ending bracket, split those open. First property, we're going to set color. This is going to be the color of the type. We're going to set that to 575 C7A, semicolon. Next line, we're going to set the line height to 1.5 ems. Next line, we're going to set font family, colon. Set that to Arial, semicolon. Next line, we're going to set font size to 14 pixels. Next line, we're going to set the background property. Now we're going to use shorthand style here, which is first going to define the background color, then a graphic, then the repeating settings, and then the position settings for the graphic. So we're going to start with the background color, which is going to be our sort of blue color. So # 515673, then a space. Then we're going to type URL, beginning and ending parenthesis. We're going to use a background graphic. Now inside of the parentheses for URL, we're going to target the images directory. Now we're inside of the CSS directory, so we need .. to come out to root. Then images / background _ gradient .jpg. Outside of the parentheses, we're going to set the repeat settings. We're going to set the repeat -x, so it only repeats on the horizontal. 0 pixels for the X position, and 0 pixels for the Y position, then a semicolon. Next, CSS rule dot page. We're going to target the overall page container. Beginning and ending bracket. Split those open. First, we're going to set a maximum width of 980 pixels. That way, when our browser gets wider than 980, the size will lock down and then we can center the page. Next line, we're going to set margin. We're also going to use shorthand style here. So the first property is top, then right, then bottom, then left. So for the top margin, we're going to set 0 pixels, hit a space. Next, we'll type auto. That's for the right. 0 pixels for the bottom. And then auto for the left. Last property, we're going to set position to relative. That way, anything that we position inside of the page area will position itself relative to this object. This is going to give us the ability to position that nav bar. Let's hit a return, and then finally, we're going to set a background color to white. So pound and 3 Fs. Then we'll hit save. To see what our work looks like so far, let's come back out to the operating system. Let's open this up in a browser. Once you hit reload, we'll see the page area here defined in white. We'll see the background gradient graphic. We'll see the background color down here at the bottom. And if we open and close our browser, we'll see that the design locks at 980 and just centers. Now that we have our background and page container styled, next we'll work on styling the headings. Next, we're going to create some styles for our headings. So after the page class, let's hit a return. Let's start with an H1, beginning and ending bracket. First, we're going to set font size. We're going to set this to 2 Ms. So the reason that we're setting Ms here is that we want all of the font sizes to be proportional based on the base font. So we're going to use a base font size of 14 pixels, and then for every other font size after this, we're going to set this with Ms, and these are proportional based. So 2 Ms will be 2 times the base font, so that'll give us roughly 28 pixels. Next, we're going to set font weight. We're going to set this to normal. We don't want our H1s to be bold. Next, we're going to set color, # A6430A, semicolon, space. Next, we're going to set margins. We want to set 0 on the top, space, 0 on the right, space, 0.5 Ms on the bottom, space, and then 0 on the left, then a semicolon. Next line, we're going to set an H2, put in our brackets. Font size, we're going to set this to 1.7 Ms, so 70% larger than the base font. Next, we're going to set margin, 0 on the top, 0 on the right, 1 M on the bottom, and 0 on the left. Now we're not going to set font weight because by default, browsers will make heading tags bold. Next line, H3, beginning and ending bracket. We're going to set font size to 1.5 Ms, so 50% larger than the base font. We're going to set margin to 0 on the top, 0 on the right, 1 M on the bottom, and 0 on the left, semicolon. Let's hit save. Let's come back out to our operating system. Let's reload this in the browser. So now we can see the headings styled based on the CSS rules, including the reddish brown color and the not bold style of the heading 1 tag here at the top. So now with our headings styled, next we'll work on the paragraph and anchor tags. Next, we're going to set rules for our paragraph and anchor tags. So on the next line, let's start with a P tag. Put in our brackets. We're going to set margin for this. 0 on the top, 0 on the right, then 0.75 Ms on the bottom, and 0 on the left. Next, anchor tags. Beginning and ending bracket. Let's set color to # DE9000, semicolon. Next line, let's set the hover state. So we're going to add a pseudo class onto that anchor tag. So :hover, space. This will be the color of the links when a user rolls over those text links. We're going to set color to #009EFF, semicolon. Choose File Save. Let's come back out to our browser. Let's reload this again. Now with the margin changed on the paragraphs, we'll see that the 0.75 ems shows up here underneath each paragraph. We see our link color showing up in orange, and when we roll over these, they show up in a light blue. Now with our paragraph and anchor tag styled, next we'll work on the footer. Next we're going to style the footer. Let's hit a return. We'll type footer, beginning and ending bracket. First property here is going to be font size. We're going to set that to 0.85 ems. That's going to give us a 15% smaller font size than the base font. Then a space. We're going to set color to # 9BA 0BD, semicolon, space. We're going to set background color, and we're going to set the background color to the same as the body. So let's come up here and just copy that color. Let's come down here and paste it. Then a semicolon. That way the footer will actually look like it's outside of that main content page container. Then a space. We're going to set padding. 10 pixels on the top, 10 pixels on the right, 10 pixels on the bottom, and 0 pixels on the left. Save our work, come back to the operating system, let's reload this in a browser. Now in the browser we can see our footer down here. Since we set the padding to 0 on the left, the copyright lines up now with the page container, and we can see that background color. Since the gradient is much taller than the amount of content we have in here so far, you can actually see that solid color here. But once we added more content and this gets taller, the background color of the footer will match the background down here. If it turns out that your website doesn't have enough content to go beyond this gradient here, then you can always go back into Photoshop, change the gradient on the background graphic, and resave out that slice. Now that we have the main content rules styled, next we'll target these individual links that are inside of the promo areas. Now in order to style the anchor links inside of the promo areas differently from the anchor links that we've defined down here, we need to add a custom class into the HTML. So let's go back to the index.html file. Let's scroll down, let's find our promo container, and let's find the individual links that are inside of the individual promo areas. So for the first anchor link, we're going to come in here and add a class. Put in the letters CTA. This stands for call to action. This is just a name that we're making up. So let's come in here and copy that class name. Let's find the second link inside of the second promo. Let's paste that in here. And then the same thing for the third link. Then hit save. Now what we need to do is write a CSS rule that's going to target this particular class if it's on an anchor tag. So we're basically going to create a CSS rule that's going to combine this anchor tag and the CTA name. So let's come back to our screen styles.css. After the footer, let's hit a few returns. The rule we're going to create is going to be a, and then a dot, CTA. Then a space, put in our brackets. So again, what this is doing is targeting anchor links that have a CTA class assigned to them. That way this differentiates these links from the ones up here. Now let's split this open. I'm going to scroll up here a little bit. So what we're going to do for these links, first we're going to set a text transform. We're going to set that to uppercase so that all of those letters will be capital. That way we don't have to actually have capital letters in our HTML. Next line, we're going to set font size to 0.9 ems. Since we're using all uppercase characters, we want to make the font a little bit smaller. So this is 10% smaller than the base font. Next, we're going to set font weight. We're going to set that to bold. Next line, we're going to set text decoration to none. That way those links won't be underlined. Lastly, we're going to set margin 0.5 ems on the top, 0 on the right, 0 on the bottom, 0 on the left. Once that's complete, let's save our work and let's reload this in a browser. Now in our browser, we'll see that all of these call to action links here are showing up with all uppercase, and they're 10% smaller than the base font. Now one thing you'll notice is that the hover state is still working and giving us that blue color. This is because the hover state on the main anchor links is cascading down through our custom class that we've assigned to these anchor links. Now that we've styled the text aspect of these links, next we'll add in a background graphic to put in the arrow. Now to add the arrows to the anchor links, we're going to add some more properties to that call to action rule. So after margin, let's set a return. First, let's set padding. We're going to set 0 on the top, 12 pixels on the right. Because we're going to align the arrow to the right, we want to make sure that the text inside of the anchor link never overlaps that arrow. 0 on the bottom, 0 on the left. Next line, we're going to set background. First property is URL. Inside of the parentheses for URL, / images / CTA _ arrow .png. Next, for the repeat properties, we're going to type in no repeat, then a space. For the X position, we're going to set right. That will align this graphic to the rightmost edge of the anchor link. Then a space, then 0 pixels for the Y position. Let's hit File Save. Let's come out to our browser. Let's hit Reload. Now in our browser, we'll see the graphic showing up inside of each one of the anchor links. So it's aligned to the right-hand side, and the 12 pixels is actually the distance from the type here to the outermost area here. So again, that gives us a little bit of padding so that the background graphic doesn't overlap with the type. Now the next thing we want to do is add in a hover state, and we want to shift this background graphic up so that we can have it turn blue along with the type turning blue. So now this technique is commonly referred to as a CSS sprite. And the idea here is that we have that single graphic that we created in Photoshop, and on a hover state, we're going to change the Y position so that the graphic actually shifts up inside of the anchor area, giving us the illusion of that arrow changing from orange to blue. So to do that, let's come back to our CSS file. We're going to start by typing a.cta:/hover space, beginning and ending bracket. The only property we're going to set in here is going to be background position. We're going to set right for the X position and -50 pixels for the Y position. If we were to take that slice and measure the top portion of the arrow that's orange in that Photoshop slice and measure down to the top of the blue area, we would come up with 50 pixels. So this is the amount we want to shift that sprite when somebody rolls over one of those call to action links. So let's hit File Save. Let's come back out and preview this in a browser. So now when I roll over these links, the illusion is that the arrow is actually changing color, but in reality what we're doing is taking that background graphic and shifting it up so that the position of the blue triangle matches exactly where the orange triangle was. Now that we have our call to action links styled, next we're going to work on the styles inside of the promo areas. Next we're going to target the headings and the paragraphs inside of the promo area. So inside of our CSS file, let's hit a few more returns. Let's create a compound rule, .promo space h3. We want to target h3 tags that are inside of an element with a promo class. Add our brackets. Then we're going to set font size to 1.1 ems. We're going to set margin to 0, then a semicolon. If we just set one number in the margin, it'll set it for all 4 sides. Next, .promo space p. We're going to target paragraphs inside of the promo area. Put in our brackets. First, we're going to set line height 1.2 ems. Space. We're going to set font size to 0.9 ems. Next, we're going to set margin bottom to 0.5 ems. And save. Let's come back out to our browser. Let's hit reload. So now we can see that these headings are a little bit smaller. We can see the font size here for the paragraphs is just 10% smaller than the base font, and everything here is just locking up a little bit tighter now. Now that we have the type styled for the promo areas, next we'll add in images into the background areas for the individual promos. Now we're going to add the promo graphics to the promo areas using CSS. But before we can do that, we need to put some custom classes in the HTML so that we can target each individual promo. So let's come back to our index.html file. Let's find our promo container, and let's find the 3 promos that are inside of the promo container. On the first one, let's come up here to the div with a class of promo, hit a space, type the number 1. We're using the actual name because we can't use numbers as a class name. Let's find the second one. type in 2, and let's find the third one and type in 3. Let's save our work. Now we have custom classes on each one of the individual promos. Let's come back to screenstyles.css. After our promo space p rule, let's see a few returns. Let's type in .promo. This is going to target the outermost container of each of the individual promos. Let's set our brackets. We're going to come in here and set background repeat to no repeat so that will be used for all of the individual promos. Let's hit a return. Let's type .promo.one. So promo.1, put in our brackets. In here, we're going to come in here and specify background image. Set URL, set the parentheses, / to come out to root, images / promo_1.jpg, then a semicolon. I'm going to come in here and copy this entire rule. Let's paste it 2 more times. For the second one, change .1 to .two for 2. Let's come over and change the file name from promo_1.jpg to promo_2.jpg. Change the last one to .3, and then change the 1 to a 3.jpg for the file name. Then choose File Save. Let's come out and look at this in a browser. Now what we see here is the individual graphics are showing up inside of each container. So inside of each individual promo, we see the individual graphics we created from Photoshop. Now, of course, you'll notice that the text is actually overlapping the individual graphics. We're going to address this when we start working on the CSS rules for our layouts. Now at this point, we're ready to start creating some CSS rules for our layout. So in your text editor, let's choose File, Open. From the My Website directory, go into the CSS directory and open screenlayoutlarge.css. Now inside of here, we're going to put our CSS rules for our large screen, which is also going to be used by default for browsers that don't support media queries. So under the comment here that says Global Rules for All Sizes, let's come in here and add a body tag, beginning and ending bracket. What we're going to do in here is set the margin to 0 and the padding to 0. This will make sure that the page container can touch the top, left, and rightmost areas of our window. Next rule we're going to create is going to target the anchor link inside of the header area that we put a logo class on. So we're going to start with header space a dot logo, beginning and ending bracket. Let's split that open. So anchor links by default have a display type of inline, which means the length or the height of the actual link is only as large as the content inside. Now we created an empty anchor link for our logo, so we're going to give this dimensions. So we're going to set the display type to block. This will make the anchor link behave more like a paragraph or a div tag. The next property we're going to set is going to be position. So we're going to set position to absolute. This will give us the ability to position the logo inside of the page container, which has a position set of relative. Next property, we're going to set background position, 0 pixels on the X and 0 pixels on the Y. Next rule, we're going to set background repeat. We're going to set that to no repeat. Save your work. Let's come back out and look at this in a browser. When we hit reload, we'll now see that the page container now touches the top area of this window. If I come down here and collapse the window down, we'll see that the page container actually touches the rightmost area and the leftmost area as well. So taking off the margin and padding on the body tag allows the elements inside to touch the edge of the window. So now with those rules in place, next we'll work on the heading area. Next we're going to style the heading area for large screens. So inside of our layout large CSS file, let's come down here after the layout large screens comment, and let's create a rule that targets the header. So we'll type header, beginning and ending bracket. Let's split those open. The first property we're going to set here is going to be a height of 275 pixels. That matches the height of the slice we created in Photoshop for the large banner. Let's hit a return. We're going to set background. We're going to set URL, beginning and ending parenthesis. Inside of the parentheses, / to come out to root. images/banner_large.jpg. Outside of the parentheses, set no repeat. For the X position, we're going to set right. And for the Y position, we're going to set 0 pixels. Let's hit a few returns. Next, we're going to type header space a dot logo, beginning and ending bracket. Let's split those open. So for the logo on large screens, we want to first set a width. We're going to set that to 150 pixels. Again, matching the slice size of the large logo in our Photoshop file. Next, we'll set height to 85 pixels. Next, we're going to set the top property. This locks on to the position absolute that we set up here earlier. So for the top value, we're going to set 28 pixels. We're going to set a right value of 30 pixels. This will make sure that the logo is always 30 pixels from the rightmost side of the screen. Next, we're going to come down here and we're going to choose background image, URL, beginning and ending parenthesis, // images / logo large .png, then a semicolon. Let's choose file save. Let's come back out to the operating system and let's load this in a browser. So now in a browser, we've given dimension to our heading area. So we can see that this is now 275 pixels tall. We have our large banner graphic in the background, and we have our logo over here on the right, which also has new block property dimensions and a background graphic referenced in from that rule we just created. So now that we have the header and logo links working for the large screens, next we'll work on the article and promo areas. Now the next element we're going to target is going to be the article. So I'm going to scroll up here a little bit. So after header a.logo, let's add article, beginning and ending bracket. What we're going to do in here is set the padding. We're going to put 60 pixels on the top, 20 on the right, 10 on the bottom, and 20 on the left. Let's choose file save. This is going to give us some padding around the content inside of the article. Let's come back out to our browser. Let's reload our page. So now we'll see that space, that padding showing up around the article. We also have 60 pixels here at the top because this is where we're going to position the navigation that's lower in the page. So we need to have a little bit of room between the article and the heading area. I'm going to leave the web browser open, but come back to my CSS file. So after article, we're going to create another rule that's going to target the promo container. So .promo_container, beginning and ending bracket. Here we're going to set padding as well. 0 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, 15 on the bottom, and 20 on the left. Let's hit a return. Promo_container space.promo. This is going to target the individual promos inside of the promo container. Put in our brackets. Let's split that open. The first rule we're going to set inside of here is going to be a width. We're going to set that to 33%. Next, we're going to set a float of left. So these two rules combined are going to make sure that each promo is going to take up 1/3 of the available space, and they're going to allow content to flow to the right-hand side of each one, giving us that 3-column effect. The next property for each promo, we're going to set background position. We're going to set 0 pixels on the X and 3 pixels on the Y. This is going to position each one of the graphics down a couple of pixels, so the top of the image will match the top of the X height of our copy. And then we'll create one more rule. .promo_container space.promo space.content. We're going to target the content divs inside of each one of the promos. What we're going to do inside of here is set padding. We're going to set 0 pixels on the top, 30 pixels on the right, 0 pixels on the bottom, and 70 pixels on the left. This is going to make sure that the text inside of the content container doesn't get within 70 pixels of the left-hand side, so we can actually see the background graphic showing without the type overlapping. At this point, let's hit File Save. Let's come back over to our browser and let's hit Reload. Now we'll see each of the individual promos is taking 1/3 of the available space. They're floating to the left of each other, giving us that column effect, and we can see that the text is now 70 pixels away from the left-handmost edge of each individual promo, allowing us to see those background graphics. So now with our article and promo areas styled, next we're going to start working on the styles for the navigation. The next thing we're going to do is start styling the navigation. So here in the web browser, I can see the navigation is showing up down here under the promo areas. So what we want to do is create some styles that are going to be global and then some styles that are going to be specific to individual layouts. So let's come back to our text editor. Let's come back to screenstyles.css. And after our promo containers, let's add a few lines. And let's add a rule that's going to target the anchor links inside of the nav element. So we'll type nav space A, beginning and ending bracket. Let's split those open. First, we're going to set color. We're going to set that to # F5A 06E semicolon. Next property is going to be text transform. We're going to set that to uppercase semicolon. Next, we're going to set text decoration to none. That way the links won't be underlined. Let's hit a return. We're going to set a display type of inline block. This way the anchor links will have more dimensions similar to that of an image tag. So they'll have height and width proportions based on how much room they need, but they won't have the straight inline style like we get with typical anchor tags and span tags. Next property, we're going to set a font weight to bold. Hit a return. We're going to set font size to 0.9 ems. Next, we're going to set a hover state for the nav elements. So nav space A : hover, beginning and ending bracket. All we're going to do is come in here and set the color to white by putting # and 3 Fs. Let's hit save. Let's come back to our browser. Let's hit reload. We'll now see the color change. We'll see that the links are in all uppercase. And when I roll over these, they turn white. So these CSS rules target the text aspects of the links. Next, we're going to work on the layout aspects of the navigation links. Now we're going to style the navigation element. Let's come back to our text editor. Let's come back to screen layout large. Let's scroll up to the top where we have our global rules. After our a.logo, let's hit a few returns. Let's type nav. We're going to target the nav element. First, we're going to set a width of 100%. Next, we're going to set a display of block. Next, we're going to set a position of absolute, so we can position this inside of that main page container as well. And lastly, let's come down and set background color to # A6430A, then a semicolon. Let's choose save. Let's come back out to our browser. Let's hit reload. So now we'll see that our navigation element now takes 100% of the available space inside of its container. So if I open this up, the page container here is conforming to 980, and the width of the navigation is taking that full area. And now we can better see the hover states as well. So at this point, we're seeing some overlap because the navigation element has absolute position properties, but we haven't actually positioned it at a specific spot. So we're going to work on that next. Now to position the nav bar, let's come back to our CSS file. Let's come back to screen layout large. Let's scroll down, and after our promo container content, let's hit a few returns. Let's type nav, beginning and ending bracket. Let's come down here and set a top property of 275 pixels. Now the height of our heading is 275 pixels, so if the top of the nav is set to 275, that will be right after the ending heading area. Next rule, nav space A, we're going to target the anchor links inside of the nav element. We're going to come in here and set a margin. We're going to set 12 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, 10 on the bottom, and 20 pixels on the left. This will space out the navigation area so that we have a little bit of space around the anchor tags, and it'll also make sure that the anchor tags space from each other 20 pixels on the left-hand side here. Let's choose File Save. Let's come back out to our browser. Let's hit reload. So now we can see the top position of this item is now at 275 pixels, which again is right under where the heading area stops. We have our margin on these individual items, which pushes the navigation element a little bit taller to encompass that margin. And then each one of these links is spaced out as well. Now that our navigation properties are set, we're going to focus on the float problem we're having down here. Since each one of the individual promos are set to float, the outer page container is not extending down to encompass all of the content inside of each one of the individual promos. And so that's what we're going to focus our attention on next. Now, to get our outer page container to extend down to encompass all of the content inside of the individual promos that have a float property, we're going to need to add another element after the promos to clear the float. So let's go back to our text editor. Let's first go into index.html. Let's scroll down, and after our 3 promos here, let's add one more div at the same level as the promos. We're going to set a class of clear-fix. Let's end that div. So this is a class name that we're making up. You can call this anything you want. Let's choose File Save. Let's come back to screenstyles.css. After our navigation element here, let's create a rule that targets that class. So .clear-fix. The property we're going to set in here is going to be clear, and we're going to set that to both. The other thing I like to do is set a line height of 1 pixel, and then choose Save. So now let's come back out to our browser. Let's hit reload. And so now that div, if you can imagine, is down here. It's got a clear both set to it, so the outermost page container will now extend down to encompass that div. And since that div appears after all of the individual promos and doesn't have a float, the outermost page container is forced to increase its height to encompass that element. Now that we have our float properties working, next we want to add one final rule to our footer for large screens. Now we have all of the CSS rules in place for our large screen in addition to all of the type styles. So if we come up here into our browser and start collapsing this down, we'll start seeing some of those CSS rules take effect. First is, as I close this down, you'll notice that the banner, having the background graphic aligned to the right, actually collapses down from the left-hand side. Even if I come over to the right-hand side of the browser and collapse this down, it always starts trimming from the left-hand side. You'll also notice that the promos down at the bottom are taking 1/3 of their individual space because they're set to 33%, so you can see those condensed down as well. But there is one additional rule I want to add to our footer. So you'll notice if I come down here and collapse the browser down, when the edge of the browser gets to the edge of the page container, notice that the copyright actually touches the edge of the browser. So what I want to do here is I want to create an inline CSS property so that we can still be on the large screen, but I want to have that footer just move away a little bit so it doesn't actually touch the edge of the browser. So to do this, let's come back to our text editor. Let's come over to Screen Layout Large. After our navigation space A, let's hit a return, and we're going to create a rule for the footer inside of an inline media query. So we're going to start by typing an @ symbol, then media, space, screen, and space, beginning and ending parenthesis, max-width, colon, 990 pixels. Then outside of the parentheses, we're going to put our brackets. Let's hit a return. Inside here, we're going to put our rule for a footer. So footer space, put in our brackets. We're going to put padding left. We're going to set that to 20 pixels and then hit save. So what this does is instead of bringing in a separate CSS file, we just have this footer rule inside of this media query. So this single rule will be enabled when our browser is under 990 pixels. So let's choose File Save. Let's come back out to our browser. Let's hit reload. And if I come down here and collapse the browser down, as soon as we get within 990 pixels, notice that the padding left takes effect on the footer and the copyright symbol moves away from the left-hand side of the browser. Now with all of our large CSS rules in place, this is how the design will look for older browsers as well. So if we collapse this down, all of the properties will condense down and we'll see exactly the same user experience in browsers that don't support media queries. So now what we're going to do for the remainder of the course is target small and medium screen size rules and rearrange the layout based on the size of the user screen. Now we're going to create some CSS rules that are going to target medium screen sizes. So let's come back to our text editor. Let's choose File Open. From the My Website folder, go into the CSS folder, and let's open screen layout medium.css. Now this file is only going to be referenced when the viewport is between 501 pixels and 800 pixels. So inside of here, the first rule we're going to target is going to be the header. Let's add our brackets. We're going to set a height of 200 pixels. This matches the height of the medium-sized banner graphic from Photoshop. Let's hit a space. Next, we're going to set background. First property is going to be URL. Inside of the parentheses, // images / banner underscore medium .jpg. Outside of the parentheses, we'll set the repeat to no repeat. For the X position, we'll set this to 90%, and for the Y position, we'll set this to 0 pixels. Next rule, header space a dot logo, beginning and ending bracket. Let's split those open. So what we're going to redefine for the logo is going to be the width. Set that to 115. Let's set the height to 70 pixels. Again, this matches the dimensions of the Photoshop graphic for the medium logo. Next, we'll set a top property of 20 pixels and a right property of 20 pixels as well. The last property we're going to set is going to be background image, URL, beginning and ending parenthesis. Inside of the parentheses, // images / logo underscore medium.png, then a semicolon. Now with these in place, let's choose File Save. Let's come back to our browser. Let's hit Reload. Now in our browser, we're going to resize the window. When we get lower than 800 pixels, we'll see that the logo now gets smaller. We'll see that the size of the heading now stops at 200 pixels, and the actual graphic in the background changes from the large graphic to the medium one. So if I resize this back, we'll see this is the large, and this is the medium. So now that the header and logo are now being styled between large and medium screens, we'll work on the navigation next. Now to position the nav bar for medium screens, let's come back to our text editor. Inside of the screen layout medium, after header logo, let's hit a few returns. Let's target the nav element. At our brackets, we're going to set a top property here of 200 pixels. Again, this matches the height of the header that we see up here, set to 200. Let's hit return, nav space A. Let's target the anchor links inside of the navigation element, put in our brackets, and we're going to set a margin right of 20 pixels. So what we want to do here is space out the navigation a little bit more. Since somebody may be on a tablet device, we want to make sure they have enough room between the links to tap them with their fingers. So let's hit save. Let's come back to our browser and let's hit reload. Now we'll see the navigation now aligns its top to 200 pixels and the navigation links are spaced out just a little bit more. So if I resize the browser, that's the large size and then the medium size. Now that we have the navigation styled for the medium screens, next we're going to work on the promos. Now the last thing we want to adjust on medium screens is going to be the promo area. If I come in here and resize the browser, we'll see that having the text show up on the right hand side of the images leaves very little room for the text. So what we're going to do is rearrange the text inside of here to show up underneath of the images. Now to do that, let's come back to our text editor. After the navigation rules inside of our screen layout medium CSS file, let's start by targeting the promo container. So let's start with .promo underscore container. Put in our brackets. We're going to set a padding of 0 on the top, 20 on the right, 15 on the bottom, and 20 on the left. Let's come in here and copy the promo container name. Let's hit a few returns. Let's paste promo container space dot promo, beginning and ending bracket. We're going to set background position here to 0 on the X and 0 on the Y. Set another rule, dot promo container space dot promo space dot content. Now we're going to target the content divs inside of each one of the individual promos. In here we're going to set padding. We're going to set 70 on the top, 30 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. So what's going to happen here is the text is going to push away from the top 70 pixels, but the left is going to be set back to 0, so the text will now align to the left-hand side of the promo area. Now there is one last rule I want to create, and that's going to be for the body tag. So let's add body, beginning and ending bracket. And what I want to do here is take away the background image. Since we can't actually see the background image on a medium screen, I don't want the users to download that extra graphic. So let's come in here and let's come down to background image, and let's add none. Let's choose File, Save. Let's come back out to our browser. Let's hit reload. And now you see that the text positions itself 70 pixels down from the top and aligns on the left-hand side to give us the typography coming underneath of the images instead of floating over to the right-hand side. Now we have all of the CSS rules in place for the medium screens. Next, we're going to target the small screens. Now to target small screens, let's come back to our text editor. Let's choose File, Open. From the My Website folder, go into the CSS directory, and let's open up Layout Screen Small.css. Now inside of here, we're going to start by targeting the header, beginning and ending bracket. We're going to set a height of 75 pixels. We're going to set background, URL, beginning and ending parenthesis, /images / banner underscore small .jpg. Set no repeat. Set right for the X position and 0 pixels for the Y position. Let's hit a few returns. Now let's target the logo. So header space A dot logo. Another set of brackets. Let's split that open. First property is going to be width. We're going to set that to 105 pixels. Next, we're going to set the height to 40 pixels. Next, we're going to set the top property to 16 pixels. We're going to set the right property to 15 pixels. And then finally, we're going to set the background image URL /images / logo underscore small .png, then a semicolon. After header, let's come in here and let's quickly add in our article. Put in our brackets. For the padding here, we're going to set 20 pixels on the top, 20 on the right, 10 on the bottom, and 20 on the left. Then hit save. Let's come back out to our browser. Let's hit reload, and let's resize the browser down to under 500 pixels. So once we hit that threshold here, we can see the difference between medium, which is here, and small. So now our header is now showing up at only 75 pixels. We have the smaller version of our logo, and we have the extra padding around the article area. Now that we have the header and logo and article styled for small screens, next we'll focus on the navigation element. Now the first thing we need to do with the navigation element is have it positioned after the content. Right now we have it absolute positioned for large and medium screens. So to do that, let's come back to our text editor. After the article element, let's type in nav, beginning and ending bracket. We'll split those open. The first property is going to be position, and we're going to set this to static. This means we're going to remove the position properties of this element, and then it's going to show up in the order that it appears in the HTML code, which is right before the footer in our HTML file. Let's hit a return. We're going to set padding next. We're going to set 10 on the top, 0 on the right, 10 on the bottom, and 0 on the left, then a semicolon. Next, we're going to set background color. We're going to set # 515673, same as the background color of the body tag and the footer. And then choose save. Come back out to the browser. Let's hit reload. And if we scroll down, we can now see the navigation is showing after all of the content. So now with the navigation in the proper place, next we'll style the links to make them look more like mobile navigation links. Now right now on our small screen device, our navigation links look like text links. So what we're going to do is write some CSS properties to turn these into links that look more like mobile link buttons. So let's come back to our text editor. After our nav element, nav space A, beginning and ending bracket. Let's split that open. First thing we're going to do is set the color. That's going to be # A6A BC5 semicolon. Next, we're going to set display. We're going to set this to block. So we want to have the anchor links on the small screen behave like blocks. So they'll be more like paragraph or div tags rather than inline blocks or inline elements from the large screen. Next property, we're going to set margin 15 pixels for all sides. Let's hit a return. Padding, we're going to set 9 pixels for all sides. Next, we're going to set border. So border colon, we're going to use shorthand style here, which is the size, then style, then color. So for the size, it's going to be 1 pixel. Hit a space, solid, space, # A6A BC5 semicolon. Let's hit a return. We're going to set background, URL, beginning and ending parenthesis, / images / mobile _ link _ arrow .png, space, set the repeat to no repeat. Let's set the X property to right and the Y property to center. Now the next property we're going to create is going to be for rounded corners. These are CSS3 properties, and some browsers still require special flags until the CSS3 specification has been finalized. So we're going to target Mozilla and WebKit. Mozilla powers Firefox, and WebKit powers Chrome, Safari, Android, and iOS devices. So let's start by typing -moz border -radius space 12 pixels. Let's come in here and select and copy that entire property. Let's hit a return. Let's paste it on the next line and replace the MOZ with WebKit. Let's hit a return. Let's paste that rule again, and let's remove the browser flags. So the final CSS3 property will be called border -radius, set to 12 pixels. Now the next rule we're going to create is going to be for a hover state. So nav space A : hover, beginning and ending bracket. We're going to set color of the type to white, so # and 3 Fs. Next, we're going to set background color. And in here, instead of using a #, we're going to use a color space called RGBA. So let's type RGBA, beginning and ending parenthesis. Inside the parentheses, we're going to specify the values for red, green, and blue. And the fourth property, which is the A, stands for alpha, or the amount of transparency. So to get white, we want to have 255 for the first value, comma, 255 for the second, 255 for the third. So red, green, and blue are all set to their maximum values, which gives us white. Then a comma, and then .15 for 15% alpha, or 85% transparent. Then outside of the parentheses, we'll hit a semicolon. Let's save our work. Let's come back out to our browser. Let's hit reload. Let's scroll down a little bit, and now we'll see that our anchor links have changed from looking more like text to now looking like mobile link buttons. Now I do like to specify a hover state on my mobile links for 2 reasons. One, if somebody condenses their browser down like we're doing here, they can get the hover state with their mouse. And second, most touch devices will activate the hover state when somebody taps on that individual link. So this will give the users feedback that they've actually tapped on a specific link. So now that our navigation is positioned and styled for small screens, next we can work on the promo area. Now on our small screen devices, we're going to want to rearrange the content again inside of the promos. So what we want to do in this case is have the promos stack vertically. We still want to have the text to the right hand side, but we want to get rid of the columns. So let's come back to our text editor. Let me scroll up here. After our navigation elements, let's hit a few returns. Let's target the promo container. Space, add our brackets. Let's set padding to 0 pixels. Let's come over here and copy the promo container name. Next rule, let's paste promo container, space dot promo, beginning and ending bracket. Let's split that open. Now what we're going to do for each individual promo, let's reset the width to auto. So this overrides the setting we had earlier, which set these to 33%. Now setting these to auto means they'll take the full width that's available by their parent. Let's hit a return. We're going to set the float to none, so they're not going to float anymore either. Next, let's set padding to 10 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. Let's hit a return. Let's set background position. We're going to set the background position to 20 pixels on the x-axis and 13 pixels on the y-axis. What this is going to do is move the graphics down a little bit from the top and a little bit in from the left so that the images don't actually touch the edge of the browser. Next property is going to be border dash top. We're going to set that to 1 pixel, solid, and for the color we're going to put £, and 3 C's for a medium gray. Let's hit a return and create one final rule. Let's paste the promo container name, space dot promo space dot content, beginning and ending bracket. Let's come in here and set the padding to 0 on the top, 20 on the right, 5 on the bottom, and 90 pixels on the left. Now the reason we're setting this to 90 is we're using the background position on the X for the images at 20. So we need to take the original 70 plus the 20 that we're offsetting this one to get a total of 90. So let's come in here and hit save. Let's come back to our browser. Let's hit reload. Now we'll see the individual promos will stack vertically because we took the float properties off. The width is auto, so the width will be the full width available by the browser. And then each one of these items will stack. The background image is positioning 20 pixels on the left, 13 from the top, and the text is positioning 90 pixels to accommodate for the new position of the background image. Now that we have the promo styled for small screen devices, next we'll work on the background and the footer elements. Now the last two things I want to do for the small screen device is to add a rule to the footer and to get rid of the background image on small screen devices as well. So let's come back to our text editor. After our promo rules, let's hit a few returns. Let's start by targeting the footer, beginning and ending bracket. Let's set border top to 1 pixel, solid, and the color is going to be $A6A, BC5, semicolon. And then the final rule, let's target the body element. Let's come into background image and let's set that to none. Just like we did for the medium screen, I don't want to download any background images for small or medium screens since the design actually touches the edges of the browser. Now with these rules in place, let's come back out to our browser. Let's hit reload. We'll see the footer now has a border across the top. Now at this point we've completed creating our responsive web design. We started from Photoshop, created a whole series of images, and actually put these together in such a way that we also get the advantage of responsive delivery, so that people on small and medium screens will download less data than people on large computer screens. Next, we'll talk about where you might want to go from here. Now in this new chapter of the Creating Responsive Web Design course, there's a new set of exercise files chapter 12. Inside here we have folders 6 through 9. If you're a premium subscriber to the lynda.com online training library, you'll have access to all of these folders. If not, you'll have access to folders 7 and 8. Inside of folder 6 is a copy of all of the Photoshop graphics that we did in the original set of graphics, but all of these files are doubled in size, so we can create the high resolution graphics that we can pick up with our CSS3 media queries. Inside of folder 7 is the Skip Photoshop section. This has all of the double-sized graphics, so if you want to skip the creating graphics part and jump right into the CSS, you can move these into your project. Inside of folder 8 is a snippets file. This has the pixel device ratio setting inside of CSS3 to be able to detect whether screens have high resolution displays. And then inside of folder 9 is a copy of the final project, complete with all of the CSS3 media queries for pixel device ratio in addition to all of the other responsive design techniques we've done throughout this course. Now to begin supporting high-resolution displays, the first thing we need to do is create some high-resolution graphics. So inside of the exercise files for chapter 12, let's open up folder 6, and let's open up the high-definition artwork.psd file. Now what I've done in this Photoshop file is double the canvas size and double the size of all of the individual graphics and the slices. If you want to learn more about what you can do with the Slice tool to create high definition graphics, I have another course on the lynda.com online training library called the Slice tool, which is inside of the Design the Web series. And to see the canvas settings, you can come down to the image menu and come down and choose image size. You'll also see here that I have the resolution still set to 72 dpi. The resolution setting has no impact on the way screens display graphics, whether it's a mobile device or a computer, but the resolution does change the behavior inside of Photoshop. So I like to keep this at 72 so that if I use the text tool, for example, and I use 10-point type, it will take roughly 10 pixels on the canvas. But again, the resolution has no impact on whether graphics are high definition or not. So I'm going to cancel out of here. So to demonstrate the size of these new graphics, I'm going to come over here and select the Slice tool. I'll bring up the Slice options for banner large. Here you'll see that the width is set to 1960 pixels and the height is set to 550 pixels. This is double the size of the original graphic. So as I mentioned before, resolution has no impact on the way graphics look on screen, but what does have an impact is the overall pixels. So when we talk about pixel density, standard or low density is considered to be somewhere around 120 pixels per inch. And when we start to consider high density displays, these devices support up to 240 pixels per inch. And if we square that, we'll have quadruple the number of pixels from a standard display. And this isn't even as high as some of the new devices that have been coming out, which can support 3 and 4 times the size of standard density. Now in this course so far, we've created standard size resolution graphics. Our banner graphic for large screens was set to 980 pixels wide. And on a standard display, this graphic looks perfect. Now, however, when we consider higher resolution displays, when we use the same graphic on those higher resolution displays, when we look at these, they'll start to look really soft or out of focus. What's happening here is these devices have more pixels than is in the actual graphic itself. So this graphic is now being stretched across more pixels than are in the actual file. To alleviate this, we can create graphics that are double the size in the actual pixels, and then those larger graphics are going to be scaled down to these devices. All that extra data from the scaling down of the graphics can be represented in all of the extra pixels on these screens. So now back in Photoshop, I'm going to cancel out of the Slice options. I'm going to go back to the My Website folder on the desktop here and open up the Images directory. So here are all of the standard graphics we created earlier. So let's go back over to Photoshop. Let's come up to the File menu. Let's choose Save for Web. I'm going to zoom out here to see all the slices. I can select each of these slices and see the compression settings. I've kept the compression setting quality the same for all of these. Let's come down and choose Save. Now from this dialog box, we're going to come down and choose All User Slices. Next, let's come down to Settings. Let's go down to Other. And under Saving Files, we're going to keep the slice name. And then for the second parameter here for the file naming, let's put _ 2x. This will indicate to us that these graphics are double the size of the originals. Let's click OK. Let's choose My Website. Let's pick the Images directory and then hit Save. Back in the My Website folder on the desktop, we'll now see we have a _ 2x for all of the individual graphics that we have doubled in size. Now if you'd like to use this Photoshop file to create your standard definition graphics from the same slices, let's come back to Photoshop. Let's do File Save for Web again. And what we can do in here is select all of the slices, holding the Shift key. With all of these selected, you can come down here to the percent, put in 50% here. What Photoshop will do is scale all of these graphics to half the original size. You can click Save. Still targeting the Images directory, come down to Settings, choose Other, and then come in here and remove the _ 2x on the slice name. Click OK, hit Save. These are already here, so I'm going to hit Replace, and then Photoshop will recreate all of the standard size graphics as well. Now that we have all of our graphics created to support high resolution displays, next we'll modify our CSS file to include these high resolution graphics in devices that support them. Now we're going to add some media queries to our CSS that's going to detect the pixel ratio of the individual devices. So in the exercise files for chapter 12, let's open up folder 8 called Snippets, and let's open up device pixel ratio in our text editor. Now this snippet contains a media query that has support for a whole series of different web browsers, and basically what they're doing here is they're picking out whether the device ratio is set to 2 or higher. This is the high definition or 240 pixels per inch. Now again, a lot of devices support higher resolutions than this, but if we set this to 2, we can at least pick out high definition displays and anything greater. So down here we have our rules go here comment. So let's come in here and copy all of this code. Let's switch back to our screen styles.css file. Let's scroll down to the bottom. I'll hit a few returns and then we'll hit paste. So again, this comment here, rules go here, is where we can put our rules. So the first thing we're going to do is swap out all of the promo graphics. So let's scroll up here and let's find promo.1, 2, and 3. Let's come in here and copy all 3 of these rules. Let's scroll down. Where we have rules go here, let's paste all of these. I'll just format this a little bit. So what we're going to do here is change out the graphics if we're on a high density display. So for background image, let's come in here and after promo_1, let's put underscore 2x. I'm going to copy the underscore 2x. Inside of promo_2, we're going to add an underscore 2x there, and then underscore 2x after 3. Now, if you were to look at this web page on a device that has a high definition display, what you would see is this graphic would now be double the size. We're now taking a graphic that was 60 by 60 pixels, and it's now taking up 120 by 120 pixels. What we need to do is scale the graphic down. Now we're using this as a background graphic, so what we're going to do inside of our CSS is let's scroll up until we have just the promo class where we've defined some of the properties for the background. We're going to come in here and add a CSS property called background size. What background size will do is control the size of the graphic that's being loaded into the background. Without this setting, the graphic will come in at its 100% size. So the first property we're going to set is going to be the width. We're going to set that to 60 pixels, then a space, and then we're going to set 60 pixels on the Y as well, then a semicolon. So now what's going to happen is that 120 pixel graphic is going to be scaled down to 60 by 60. And then on high density displays, we're going to have all those extra pixels in there, which are going to be able to represent that graphic. So the trick here is to set the background size in conjunction with specifying larger graphics for devices that have high resolution displays. Now with our promo graphics supporting high resolution displays, next we'll work on the logos and the banners. Now we're going to set some properties and some media queries so that we can switch out the logos and the banner graphics. So first let's switch over to screen layout large.css in your text editor. Inside of here, let's scroll down and find header space a.logo. Here we can see the width is set to 150 and the height is set to 85, and we're using logo large ping as the background graphic. So inside of this rule, let's come in here and add the background size property. And we're going to set the width, which is the first property, to the same setting that we have up here. So we're going to set width to 150 pixels, then a space, 85 pixels for the height, then a semicolon. I'm going to come in here and copy this. Next, we'll come up to the header where we're specifying banner large.jpg. Let's come in here. Let's add the background size in here as well. Let's change the width to 980, and we'll set the height to 275, again to match the height that's set up here. Now with these in place, let's scroll down to the bottom. Let's hit a few returns. Let's switch over to our snippet. Let's copy this entire media query. Switch back to screen large layout.css. Let's paste this. Now what we're going to do is let's come up and grab the header and header logo. Let's copy these entire rules. Let's scroll down and paste them inside of here. Now let's come in here and change only the properties that we need to change for the high pixel density. So let's come in here and get rid of height. Let's change background to background image. Let's get rid of the other properties in that shorthand style. Let's also get rid of background size. And now let's change banner large to banner large underscore 2x. Next for the logo, let's get rid of all of these properties as well. And let's just leave background image. And we'll change logo large to logo large underscore 2x. Now with these rules in place for the large screen, let's come in here and copy this media query and those two rules. Copy to the clipboard. Save your work inside of layout large. Let's switch over to screen layout medium.css. Down here at the bottom, let's paste in those rules. Let's come down here and change banner large to banner medium. Let me copy the name medium. Let's change logo large to logo medium underscore 2x. And then let's scroll up. Let's find header space a logo. After background image, let's hit a return. Let's add background size. Again, we're going to follow the width and height set up here. So 115 for the width and 70 pixels for the height, semicolon. And up here for the header, let's hit a return. Let's add background size. The width is going to be 800 pixels and the height's going to be 200 pixels. Now with our medium CSS modified, let's save our work. Let's switch over to screen layout small.css. Let's scroll down to the bottom, hit a few returns. Let's paste in the media query and the CSS rules from the large screen size. Let's come down here and change banner large to banner small. And change the logo to logo small. Let's scroll up. Let's find the header. Let's set background size to 500 pixels wide by 85 pixels tall. Then let's come down to the header space a.logo. And here we're going to set background size to 105 pixels by 40 pixels. And then save your file. And now with all of these changes in place, we have a design that'll not only change its layout based on screen size, but it'll also change the individual graphics based on the pixel density of the device that's looking at your website. Now earlier in the course, we talked about the fact that this particular design approach not only changes the layout, but also changes the download size. Supporting high definition graphics means that the download's going to be a lot larger. If we take a look at the new download settings for devices that have high pixel density displays, we'll see that the large screen will go from 180 kilobytes to approximately 365 kilobytes. Medium will go from 73 to 176, and small screens will go from 32 to 61 kilobytes. Now one thing you'll want to experiment with is for the double-sized graphics, setting the compression settings a little bit lower. Since the graphics are going to be scaled down to match the size of the devices, you might be able to get away with compressing the images a little bit more to get your file sizes down. There are a new set of exercise files for this chapter. Inside of the exercise files, there are two folders that are available to all members of the lynda.com online training library. Folder 10 contains a print.css document. We're going to use this in the HTML and specify this for printing. And we also have an HTML file in folder 12 where we're going to add some content to our HTML page that will only show up when printing. Now, if you're a premium subscriber to the lynda.com online training library, you'll have access to all of the folders. Inside of folder 11, we have a Photoshop file where we're going to create print optimized graphics. Now you don't have to create a separate set of graphics for your design, but if you do want to create black and white graphics or create less saturated color graphics, we're going to cover that here. Now there is a QR code in here as well. This particular QR code points to my author page on lynda.com, but I will talk about some ways that you can create your own QR codes. And in the two final project folders, we have an implementation of each option for printing images. One is CSS based, which is option 1, and the other one is HTML based, which is option 2. So as we discuss these two options later on in the chapter, you'll be able to compare your project with these final projects. When preparing the graphics for your web page, you may want to consider creating a series of graphics specifically for use when somebody prints your web page. This can include creating a series of black and white images, or maybe even creating less saturated color images to help save on ink. So to explore these options in the exercise files inside of the folder 11, let's open up eprinterfriendlyartwork.psd up in Photoshop. So in the layers panel here, I have two layer groups with two of these options. First, under less saturated color, let's come over here and show that layer group. If we toggle this open, this is made up of two adjustment layers. First, I'll just turn on hue saturation. If I come over here and double click on this little icon here, this will bring up the properties panel. So here, all I did was set the saturation to -33, and you can play with this value. And you might even want to test a few to see what the ink coverage will look like. If somebody's printing your web page in color and there's a lot of ink coverage like we have in this top image, the paper can be pretty wet and the user will have to use a lot more ink. So to save some ink, we can lower the saturation. Then I have a second adjustment layer adjusting the levels. If I click on this icon here, what I've done is I've brought the white value down significantly and the medium value down as well. And this will further decrease the amount of ink needed to print these images. Now, if you feel the graphics on your site can be represented in black and white instead, then I have another set of adjustment layers here. So I'll come over here and hide the less saturated color group, and let's turn on the black and white group. In here, I've done something very similar. I have an adjustment layer here called black and white. If I click on this icon here, we can see the properties. I started by clicking the blue filter property up here at the top, and then I made further adjustments. And then I also added a levels adjustment here as well. So it's my preference for the content of this page to go with black and white images. So I'll hide the properties panel. Next, we'll come over to the cropping tool, click and hold and come down to the slice tool. Hold the Command or Control key over a slice to get the slice options. Double click. Here I've named this slice print_banner. Click OK. For each of the promo images, these are called print_promo 1, 2, and 3. And then we have our print_logo. So with all of these named print_ at the beginning, these will all group together in the images directory. So to save these, we'll go to the File menu, then choose Save for Web. With the logo slice selected, make sure we save this as Ping24. We still want the transparency of that graphic. Each of the other images, you can pick different compression settings. I'm going to go with about 65% quality on the JPEGs here. Come down and choose Save. Next, we'll target our My Website folder on the desktop. Under Slices, make sure we have all user slices selected. Choose the images directory, then hit Save. Next, we'll close our Photoshop file, go back to the desktop, open up our images directory, and we'll see all of our print graphics now showing up here. Now I'll go back to the exercise files. Inside of folder 11, let's go grab the QR code. Let's Option or Alt drag that into this directory as well. So now we have all of the graphics that we need for print. Now the QR code that we just copied will actually link you to my author page on lynda.com. If you want to create your own QR code, there are quite a few websites where you can plug in a URL and get a QR code you can save. QRstuff.com is the one that I like to use. You can see 2 others here. And of course, a quick Google search will find many more options. And if you happen to be an Adobe InDesign user, version CS6 or higher, you can find a QR code generator under the Object menu and then choose Generate QR Code. Put in the URL, click OK, and then you can simply zoom up on this and take a screenshot, or you can use InDesign to export for web and get the graphic that way. And now with our print graphics created, next we'll add some additional content to our web page that will only show up when the user prints the page. Now in order to add more information to the print version of our page, we'll need to add some content into the HTML. We're also going to add another CSS file to our project that will specify to only be used when printing. So let's go to the exercise files. Inside of folder 10, let's copy print.css. Let's copy that over to our project in the CSS folder. Now in our project folder, let's come down and open index.html up in a text editor. And let's come up and copy the CSS reference for the screen layout large. Let's copy that to the clipboard. Let's come down after the layout medium. Let's hit a return. Let's paste that. Now later on in the course, we're going to specify a media type of print, but I'm going to leave this out for now so that we can use our web browser to test the print version. Next, we'll come over here and change screen layout large to print.css. And now with this in place, let's go back to the exercise files. Let's go into folder 12 and let's open up the file dfooterprintmessage.html up in our text editor. So here we have a div element. We have a print class and a QR class. We have an image that points to the QR code. We set the width here to 100. Then we have some information about this page. And this information is going to make sense if somebody's looking at the printed version of this page. So we're going to tell people that this page is printed from lynda.com. And then we have a little bit of information about lynda.com. So we'll come in here, select this entire set of text. Let's choose Edit Copy. Close the file. Back in our index.html, let's scroll down. And inside of the footer area, after the copyright, let's hit a return. And let's paste in all that content. I'll just come in here and format that. And now with that in place, let's go back and look at our index.html file up in a browser. And now in the footer area, we can see the QR code and all of the text that we've added. So now with our print aware content in the page, next we'll define some styles to change the text color and the background colors and make the page easier to read on paper. For print optimization and readability, we're going to set all the font colors to black so there's no screening to simulate color when printing in black and white. We're also going to use a serif font, which is easier to read on paper, as well as remove the background color of the page. And now in our index.html file, we have already hooked in our print CSS file down here. So let's switch back over to our project file. Let's go into the CSS folder and let's open up print.css in our text editor as well. So here's a brand new blank CSS document. Let's hit a few lines down. First, let's specify the body element. So we'll type body, beginning bracket, and ending bracket. Then we'll get the cursor inside of the brackets and we're going to specify font, line height, background, and color. So first we're going to specify font. So we'll type font, colon, space, 12 point. Let's choose Georgia, then a comma. We'll set the font face to Times New Roman. Then we'll set 2 backups. So we'll set Times and then serif. On the next line, we'll set line height. We're going to set this equal to 1.3. Next, we'll set background. We'll set this to just white. So we'll do pound and 3 Fs. Then we'll choose color, £, which is the color of the type, and we'll set black, which is 3 zeros. So you'll notice here we didn't set background image or background color. By specifying background and then only putting in a color, we are overriding all of the position and property settings of the background graphic that we defined earlier. After the body element, let's come down here and define our heading tags. So we'll type H1, comma H2, comma H3, comma P, and then LI. And then we're going to set the color for all of these elements to inherit, which means it's going to inherit the color of black that we defined in the body tag. Let's hit a few more returns. Let's add another rule for H1. We're going to set the margin of the H1s to 0, since we don't need any of that spacing to push that away from the header element. Let's go down a few more lines. So now we're going to redefine the anchor tags. We don't want to have them be a different color or underlined or anything. So let's come in here and specify A, comma, then A : visited. We're going to set the color here to inherit as well. And then we're going to specify text decoration to none, so that the links don't look any different than any other content on the page. Add a few more lines and we're going to target the page class, the navigation element, and then the article element. So first, .page to target the page class. We're going to set the width of the page container to 100%. We're going to set the margin to 0. And then we're going to set the padding to 0 as well. Next, for the navigation, we'll type nav. We're going to set the display of nav to none, so it doesn't show up at all on paper. Then for the article, let's set the padding to 0 for all 4 sides. And then finally, let's set the properties for the footer. So we'll type footer, begin our bracket. We're going to set the color of all of the text in the footer to black, so £, and 3 zeros. Then we're going to set background to none. Next, we'll set the padding to 0. And then we're going to set the font size to 0.7 ems. And now with these changes in place, save your CSS file. Let's switch back to our browser and let's come up and hit reload. Now we'll see we have no more background graphic. All of our type is solid black. It's all in a serif font. And we can see the smaller type specified in the footer area. Now with our basic CSS rules in place, we do want to add a print class to both our print.css file and our screenstyles.css file, so we can turn off the print-aware content when we're looking at this on a computer screen. So in our HTML file, when we added that content, the div had a class of print. So we're going to lock onto this to hide this for screens and show it for print. So let's go back to our project file. Let's find screenstyles.css. Let's open this up in our text editor. And in our page here, I'll just scroll down to the bottom. Let's hit a few returns. Let's add a print class. Beginning and ending bracket. We'll set display to none. Hit save. Let's switch back to our browser. Let's hit reload. We'll see that print content disappears now. Now we'll switch back to our text editor. Let's go into print CSS and we're going to turn this back on. So we'll add our print class again with our brackets and we're going to set display to inherit. Save your file, switch back to the browser, and then hit reload. Now, since we are looking at the print style sheet on screen, we are seeing this content down here, but when we activate our print.css file for print only, the on-screen view of this page will not have that footer content. So now with these in place, what we're going to do next is we're going to show what the URLs are for the hyperlinks. Now we have a hyperlink here in our main content, as well as hyperlinks after each one of the individual promotions. When we print this page, the user reading the page won't know where these links go. So we're going to use CSS3 pseudo classes to display the URL of these links when the page is printed. On a printed page, we can't make use of hyperlinks since that's an interactive feature. However, we can pull the data or the information about the hyperlink out using CSS and display that on a page. So somebody who's looking at the printed page could see the URL and type it in if they wanted to get back to the website. And so to do this, we're going to make use of CSS3 pseudo classes. So back in our print.css file, down at the bottom of the document, let's hit a few returns. Let's come down here and add some pseudo classes to the anchor links inside of the article element. So first we'll type article, then space, then a, link, after. Then let's specify the visited as well. So article space a, visited, after. Let's put in our brackets. So what we're doing here is targeting the link pseudo element for the anchor tag, which is the link color, and the visited link color. So whether or not the user has visited these links or not, they'll both display the URL with these pseudo classes specified. Now inside of these pseudo classes, the first property we're going to set is going to be content. So we'll type content, colon. Then we're going to add a string literal. Inside of the quotes, we're going to put a space, then a beginning parenthesis. Then outside of the quotes, we're going to add the href from the anchor links. So to do that, we'll type attr, beginning and ending parenthesis, and then inside of the parentheses, we'll type href. So basically what this is doing through CSS is it's finding the link, it's looking for the attribute of href, and it's going to replace the value of that right here. So then after this, 2 more quotes for a string literal. Let's hit a semicolon. Inside of the content area here, let's add an ending parenthesis and then a space. So inside of our content area, every time there's a hyperlink, we're going to add this string, which will give us a space, and put the URL in parentheses. Next, let's add a font style, and we'll make this italic. So we'll do font-style, italic. With that in place, let's hit save. Next, let's switch back to our HTML file. Let's scroll up to the top of the document. Now earlier in the course, we added a hash symbol here just so we could see the hyperlink and style it. Let's replace that with a URL. So I'll just put a link back to lynda.com to my author page. With this in place, save your files. Back in the browser, let's come up and hit reload. Now what we'll see in the browser is we have our hyperlink here, and then you'll see that we have the URL showing up inside of parentheses and in italic. So when I resize the content, this content shows up as if it were in the HTML, but it's really being defined by our CSS. So a user who prints this page will see the URLs in the content, while people looking at this on screen can see and make use of the hyperlink. So now with the URL showing in the article area, let's do the same thing for the promo areas. Let's go back to our code editor. Let's go into our print.css file. Let's scroll down, set a few returns. Next, we're going to target the anchor links with a CTA or call to action class. We'll add an after pseudo class to those as well. And since the promo areas have less horizontal space, since they're stacked 3 across, we're going to set a few extra properties, including a display type, so we can have the URL show up on its own line. So the first thing we're going to do is start with content. And we're going to just make this generic for all of them. So we're going to say, learn more online at lynda.com. On the next line, we'll set display type to block. We're going to set font style to italic. Then we'll set font weight to normal, since an earlier CSS rule set those to be bold. Then we'll set a margin top to 15 pixels. Now I'm not making use of the attribute href in this particular example. I wanted to show you another strategy where you could simply put a small version of the URL, in this case just lynda.com, in case you have really long URLs. So with that in place, let's go back to our browser. Let's hit reload. And now we can still see our call to action text, read the article or visit our blog. And then we have a simple message on each one which tells the user to learn more at lynda.com. So now that we've styled our anchor links for the printed page to either show the destination URL or a custom message, next we'll add some additional styling for the promo area and the footer content. Now we're going to add a few finishing touches to our layout before we get into the 2 options for working with images. So let's go back to our text editor. Inside of print.css, let's hit a few returns after our call to action pseudo class. And what we're first going to do is target the promo container. Then we're going to restyle the call to actions without a pseudo class, just the base links. Then we'll set some rules inside of the footer to target the QR class and the QR image. So let's start with .promo_container. We're going to set a margin top to 25 pixels. We're going to set the padding to 0 on all sides. Then we're going to set the font size to 11 point. Next, we'll target the anchor link with a call to action class. We're going to set text transform to none to get rid of all of the uppercase. We're going to set the background to none to get rid of those arrows. Then we'll set the color to inherit just to make sure that they're showing up as black. Next, we'll target the QR class inside the footer. So footer space.qr. We're going to set border top to 1 pixel solid. Then we'll set the letter D for red, green, and blue, giving us a light gray. Next, we'll set margin top to 20 pixels. A padding top of 20 pixels to push the content away from the rule. Then next, we'll target the image inside of the QR div. So footer space.qr space img. We're going to set the QR code to float left. Then we're going to set a margin right of 20 pixels. So with these rules in place, we now have all of the CSS in place with the exception of how we're going to handle our images. So now back in the browser, let's hit reload. I'm going to open this up a little bit more. Both portrait and landscape are a little wider than what we're seeing here. So now we can see that the links are now showing in upper and lower case. And our QR code is now floating to the left of all of the footer content. And now with these rules in place, we have two basic options on how we can deal with images in our page for printing. We can use background images, which we've been using throughout this entire course, or we can use image tags placed in our HTML. And we'll talk more about those options in the next lesson. Now, when we're only working with HTML and CSS on a web page, we have two basic options for how we bring graphics into a web page. We can bring them in as background images using CSS, which is what we've been doing throughout this course, and we can use image tags in the HTML. Now, the advantage of using background images is that there's no extra HTML needed in the page. We can also switch the graphics with CSS when we want, based on individual media types. And the images are not loaded until a specific media type has been satisfied. So images specified in a print CSS, for example, do not get downloaded until the user decides to print the page. Now, the downside with using background images and printing is that a lot of browsers will default to not printing background images. So the user might have to check a checkbox that says print backgrounds in order to see the graphics. So there's a chance that a user might print your page but not get any of the graphics. Now, the other option is to use image tags in the HTML. The advantage of this approach is that those graphics will be included when somebody prints the page. They won't have to check any extra settings in the print preview dialog. The downside of this approach is that it requires extra HTML be added to your page. This also means we can't switch the image file themselves with just CSS. So this means the print version of the graphics, or even the graphics that are changing based on responsive screen sizes, cannot be done through CSS. We would have to use another technology like JavaScript in order to do that. And then finally, all of the images will be downloaded because the browser will see the image tag, even if the user doesn't print the page. So this will add to the overall size or download of your web page. Now, since there are some pretty strong arguments for both approaches, what we're going to do in this lesson is we're going to implement option 1, which will be using background images, and then we're going to implement option 2, which will be using HTML. And then once you're comfortable with both of these options, you can then use either strategy based on the project you're working on. In this lesson, we'll cover the first option for implementing graphics into your web page so that we can print them, and that's going to be using CSS backgrounds. Now, since we've already been using that same technique throughout this course, we're not going to have to do too many CSS rules to make this work. So what we're going to do first is on the desktop, let's take the My Website folder we've been working with. Let's rename this to My Website Option 1. Then let's Option drag a copy on the Mac or copy and paste in Windows and create a second copy of this project. This way we can take the work we've done so far and explore option 1, and in the next lesson we can explore option 2. So let's open up our project for website option 1. So inside of the My Website option 1, let's select the print.css file in the CSS folder and the index.html, and we'll open those in our code editor. Then we'll switch over to our code editor. Let's go into print.css. Let's scroll down to the bottom. After the rules for footer, I'll add some lines down here. Let's first target the header element. So we'll type header, beginning and ending bracket. I'll split these open. Then we'll redefine elements in the header area. So first we'll start with the height. We're going to set this to 125 pixels. Next we'll set the background properties. First is URL. We'll set this to /images/print_banner.jpg. Set the repeat to no repeat. Set the X property to right and the Y property to 0 pixels. Next, we'll set the background size. We'll set this to cover. That way the background image will scale for portrait and landscape. Next, we'll set margin bottom to 15 pixels. And then we'll set the position property to relative. This way we can position the logo in relation to the header element. Now with the header properties defined, now we're going to target the logo inside of the header. So we'll type header space a.logo. Put in our brackets, hit a few returns. First, we'll change the width. We'll set this to 115 pixels. Then we'll change the height to 70 pixels. Next, we'll set our top position property to 15 pixels. Then we'll redefine the background. We'll set URL to /images/print_logo.png. We'll set the repeat to no repeat, and then 0 on the X and Y position properties. Then for background size, we're going to set the width to 115 pixels, and then the height to auto. After that rule, we're going to target the background graphics of the promos. So we're going to start with .promo, .one for the first one, put in our brackets. We'll redefine the background image. We'll set URL to ./images/print_promo_1.jpg. And then we'll set the background size to 55 pixels for both width and height. Now with that rule in place, we'll select this entire line, Command or Control C to copy this. I'm going to paste it 2 more times on the next 2 lines. On the second line, we're going to change 1 to 2. Come down and select Promo1 JPEG and change this to Promo2 JPEG. The third one, we'll change this to Promo3 JPEG. And I'll come over here and we'll target the class called 3. So now we're redefining the background graphics in the header to use the print banner graphic. The logo's using the print logo graphic, and we're using the print versions of all 3 of the promos in the promo area. Now with these in place, we'll come back to the browser. We'll come up and hit reload. We'll now see black and white versions of all of our graphics, the logo, the header graphic, and all of the promos. Now let's go back to our code editor. Let's go back to the index.html file. Let's come down here and find the line where we imported the print CSS file. What we're going to do inside of this link element is add our media query for print. So we'll add a media attribute, set that equal to the word print in quotes. Now the CSS rules will only be invoked when we print the page. Save your work. Switch back to our browser. Now we'll hit reload. Now we have all of our original CSS rules in place for our screen. And now if we come up to the file menu, come down and choose print, we'll now see our CSS rules are showing up in the print preview area. Now what I had mentioned earlier is that some browsers will not default to turning on printing backgrounds or printing headers. So if I turn off print backgrounds, for example, you'll see that we just have a white space here where the images are being brought in through CSS. And then if I click print backgrounds, you'll see them show up again. So on the Macintosh platform, it looks something like this, where we have a print background checkbox. And then on the Windows platform, the user experience is very similar. There's a specific checkbox in the print preview area where the user can turn on print background colors and images. And now that we've explored using image backgrounds with CSS for our printing, next we'll take a look at adding image tags into our HTML and using those for print. Now in this lesson, we're going to take a look at option 2 for implementing graphics into our page by adding image tags into our HTML. So in the last lesson, we duplicated our My Website project into option 1 and option 2. So let's go into option 2, which has all of the code before we implemented option 1. And let's take a look at adding image tags to our HTML. So let's open up the folder for CSS. Let's select print.css. Let's also select index.html. And let's open both of these up in our code editor. Now inside of our code editor, let's go into the HTML file. Let's scroll down. Let's find the header element here. Now we're currently using CSS to put a background image into this header element. So what we're going to do instead is put an actual image tag in here. So let's come in here and start by adding our image tag. Then a space. Let's set our source equal to images/print_banner.jpg. Next, we'll give this a class of print. Then we're going to set a width of 100%. Then we'll end the image tag. So by using this class of print, earlier in the course, we set up a print class in our styles rule, which will hide all of these elements. So this graphic won't show up on screen, but it will show up when we're printing. Next, let's get our cursor inside of the anchor tag here. We're going to put an image inside of here as well, since again, we are using a background graphic for the logo. So in here, we'll create an image tag. We'll set the source equal to images/print_logo.png. We'll add our class of print onto here as well. And then we'll set the width to 115 pixels. Then we'll end the image tag. Next, we'll scroll down a little bit. Let's find our promo areas. So here's promo 1. Inside of the div content, before the H3 tag, let's come in here and add an image tag for the promo graphic. So again, we'll start with an image tag. We'll set the source equal to images / print _ promo _ 1.jpg. We'll add a class of print and we'll set the width to 55, then end the image tag. Now with that in place, let's come in here and select this entire image tag, copy it. Let's come inside of the promo 2 element inside of content. And before the H3, let's paste that. Let's come back and change promo 1 to promo 2.jpg. Now we'll scroll down, find promo 3. And before the H3 tag in this one, let's come in here, paste our line, and replace promo 1 with promo 3.jpg. Now with our images added to the HTML, let's scroll up to the top. Let's find the link reference for our print.css file. Let's come in here and add our media attribute. So we'll set media equal to 2 quotes, put in print, save your HTML. Let's go over to our print.css file. Let's scroll down to the bottom. And now we'll redefine some of the CSS to remove the background images from those elements. So we're going to start with the logo. So we'll type header space a.logo, begin our bracket. We're going to set our top property to 15 pixels. Then we're going to come in here and set the background property to none. By simply specifying the background property, this will get rid of all of the other background properties, including the images. Let's hit a few returns. Now we'll target the header element. So we'll type header, beginning bracket. We're going to set our height to 125 pixels. We're going to set background to none, getting rid of that background image as well. We're going to set margin bottom to 15 pixels. We're going to set a position property of relative, again, so we can position the logo inside of the header element. And then we'll set overflow to hidden as well. That way the background image we're placing inside of this element will be clipped or cropped based on the size of that header. And now we're going to target the 3 individual promos, promo 1, 2, and 3, by the class names, the main promo elements, and then the image inside of the promos. So we'll hit a few returns. We'll start with .promo.1, comma, .promo.2, and then comma, .promo.3. We're going to target all of these at once. Let's add in our beginning bracket, and we'll set background to none. That will get rid of the background in all 3 of those. Then we'll target just .promo. We're going to set position to relative. Since we have images inside of there, we need to position those over to the left. Then we're going to target the image in the promo. So .promo space image. We're going to set position to absolute. We're going to set top to 0 and the left property to 0. Now in our promo areas, we are padding the left-hand side about 70 pixels, giving us enough room for the background image. Now the background image is going to be set to none, which we've set here. So that will still give us those extra pixels on the left from the padding. So by setting position relative on the promo item here, we have an area where we can take the image and position these over to the left, and we'll have enough room based on that left padding for these images to fit. So with all of these in place, let's save our work. Let's come back over to the browser. Let's come up and hit reload. Now since we set the media type to print for our print CSS, we'll see our screen rules showing up here. And just like before, we'll go to the file menu, come down and choose print. And now whether or not we have print backgrounds turned on or off, we'll see all of the graphics showing up in the page. So as I mentioned before, one downside of this particular approach is that all of the image tags in the HTML means that all of these graphics will download when the user looks at the page, even if they don't print the page. However, if some of the graphics are really important, such as maybe a QR code, or maybe a receipt or a boarding pass or something that has to be printed, then the trade-off for that file download might be worth it if printing that content is necessary. So at this point, we've covered 2 particular approaches to putting images into a page that can be printed, CSS backgrounds and image tags. And you can certainly mix and match these techniques based on your project and what needs to be printed if a user prints your page. Next, we'll talk about using CSS page breaks so you can gain a little bit of control over when content breaks to different pages when a user prints your site. Now, another option I want to take a look at is using page breaks in CSS. This gives you the ability to help control where some of the content breaks on different pages when you print your website. Now, we can use page breaks in either of the two options that we put together earlier. So I'm going to come into option 2. I'm going to select print CSS and index.html and open these up in a code editor. So to demonstrate the way this works, let's come over to print CSS. Let's scroll down. And what we're going to do in here is on promo container, we're going to add a page break before on this particular element so that when we print our page after the introductory content, all the three promos, the three individual promos that are inside a promo container will start on a new page. So on the promo container rule, let's come in here after font size and let's add a page break property. So we'll do page dash break dash before, then a colon. Then we're going to set always, then a semicolon. So when we print the page and the browser sees this promo container, it will insert a page break before this element. Again, so all the promos will now show on the next page. So with that property added, let's come back to our browser. Let's hit reload. Then we'll go to the file menu, come down and choose print. Now we'll see that we have our header area and our introductory paragraph. And now if we come down here and preview page 2, we'll see that the page break has been inserted and all of the promos are now on the second page. Now this technique can be really advantageous if you have a really long web page. Now to show you a real world example, I'm going to bring up a website that we put together for the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Here we have a really long website. Here we have a lot of content on a single responsive page. We can see all of the content has been broken into individual sections and we've used some different architectural graphics for the design. We can click on the navigation and scroll down. Or I can click home and scroll all the way up to the top. So if somebody were to print this page, we would want to have a little bit more control over the individual sections that are printed. So we implemented CSS page breaks on this particular site so we could have a little bit more control over the printing. So now if I come down here and click on the print button, or if we go to the file menu and choose print, we can see on the first screen here, we have only the content for the first panel, and we have a QR code that will link to the main website. We can see down here there are 9 screens, so I can click through each one of these individual screens. And we also used CSS to position the architectural graphics at the top of every screen on the print page, even though the on-screen version has the images across the top, left, or right. And on the final page, we have a larger QR code for the Google map. And now if you'd like to check out this website for yourself, I've set up a shortcut on our website. So if you go to codifydesign.com/go/linda-css-page-breaks, this will bring you to the final website. And you can check out not only the responsive design, but see how the CSS rules break the content of this web page across multiple pages. So using CSS page breaks in combination with other things we learned in this chapter, such as simplifying the design and adding QR codes and other content, gives us the ability to optimize our design, not only across varying screen sizes, but across paper as well. Now, if this course was one of your first experiences with HTML and CSS, then I would definitely recommend some additional courses in the lynda.com online training library. First would be HTML5 First Look. This will show you more of the HTML elements that are available with HTML5, and CSS3 First Look, which will give you more properties that are available with CSS3. And for those familiar and comfortable with HTML and CSS, I would definitely recommend adding JavaScript and jQuery into the mix. I have a whole series of courses on the lynda.com online training library that will walk you step by step through creating rich interactive user experiences. We'll build things like a homepage promotional marquee, an HTML5 video and photography gallery. We'll create some rotating carousels, some drop-down menus and tooltips, and even an interactive map. And you'll want to check back on this section often because we're adding new and interesting courses here all the time. And with that, that concludes creating a responsive web design. And as always, I really appreciate you watching my course.